All right, let's just jump right in. For literally thousands of years, we've looked at animals and we've all wondered, right? What is actually going on in there? Is it all just instinct, simple reflex, or is there something more? Today, we're going to explore a really radical idea that pretty much challenges everything we thought we knew about the inner lives of animals.
The philosopher Jacques Derrida really hit the nail on the head with this quote. Think about it. We use one single huge word, the animal, to talk about every living thing that isn't human. A lizard, a dolphin, a chimpanzee, an ant. Boom. They all get tossed into this one giant bucket, totally separate from us.
And this isn't just about language, you know? This one big idea, the animal, has massive consequences. It completely erases the incredible, mind-boggling diversity of life out there. And what it does is it builds this artificial wall between us and them. It lets us look at another being and see a machine, where there might actually be a mind.
Yeah, this wall, it's not just a casual thing. It is a deep philosophical cage that's been built over centuries. It's sometimes called metaphysical humanism, which is just a fancy way of saying it's this core belief that humans are fundamentally separate from and superior to the rest of nature. And that one idea has shaped how we treat, how we study, and ultimately how we fail to understand the other beings we share this planet with.
So this big philosophical wall, it didn't just stay in books and lecture halls. Oh no, it got reinforced by science, by traditions that deliberately chose to ignore any sign of an inner life in animals. The rule was brutally simple. If you couldn't measure it with a tool, well then it just didn't count. It didn't exist.
And this created this huge split in how we thought about it. So on one side, you had hardcore behaviorism. They saw the animal mind as a black box, totally unknowable. All that mattered was stimulus in, response out. But on the other side, you had fields like ethology and even psychoanalysis that were insisting, no wait, animals are subjects. They're beings with rich, real, lived experiences. Their psyche is real.
The famous ethologist Konrad Lorenz just summed up the whole problem perfectly, didn't he? This conviction that if something can't be easily put into a spreadsheet, if it can't be quantified, then it must not really exist. I mean, what a deeply flawed way to see the world. It completely dismisses the very essence of what it means to be alive.
But here's the thing, long before science had the right tools or even the right questions, literature and just paying attention gave us these incredible glimpses into the animal soul. Stories that are just impossible to explain away as simple reflex.
I mean, think about Argos, Odysseus' dog from the Odyssey. After 20 years away, the old dog is lying there, totally neglected. He hears his master's voice, wags his tail one last time, and then just lets go. Now you tell me, is that just a stimulus response, or is that the final expression of 2 decades of memory, of loyalty, of love?
And it's not just about the positive emotions either. It goes both ways. The writer Émile Zola described his dog, Fanfan, who seemed to be gripped by this psychic torment, endlessly turning in circles, something he called involuntary, stubborn, and wild. This points to the idea that animals can suffer from internal turmoil, from neuroses, just like we can. But maybe the most visceral, the most gut-punching account comes from Lorenz himself. After he was gone for a long time, his goose, Stasi, didn't just greet him with a honk. Instead, she let out what he could only describe as a superb she-wolf howl, a sound that released months of pent-up grief and mental torture. That isn't just a noise, that is the sound of a psyche in pain. So these stories, they're incredibly powerful, right? But for the longest time, they were just dismissed as anecdotes, sentimental stories. But now, finally, the scientific consensus is catching up to what poets and pet owners have known for centuries.
The real turning point was in 2012. A major group of neuroscientists got together and issued the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. And their conclusion, based on just overwhelming evidence, was crystal clear. The neurological hardware for consciousness is not unique to humans. Mammals, birds, and yeah, even octopuses, they have it too.
Okay, so let's just pause there for a second. Animals have consciousness. That is a massive, massive step. But what we're looking at today asks us to go even deeper, to a place that's way more radical, way more provocative. If animals have a conscious mind, could they also have an unconscious? And here's the bombshell. This quote comes from Sigmund Freud himself, the father of psychoanalysis, basically suggested that his whole model of the psyche, the entire apparatus of conscious and unconscious forces of ego and id, could actually be valid for higher animals.
I mean, just think about that. This idea opens up a completely new way of understanding them. So you might be wondering, okay, how on earth could we possibly find evidence for something as hidden as an animal's unconscious mind? Well, it turns out there are some powerful clues, if you know where to look, and they fall into three main areas. So first, there's psychopathology. That's just a simple way of saying the evidence of animal mental illness. Second, we can see it in trauma, how really disturbing events can leave behind deep, lasting psychological scars. And third, and this is a big one, we can look at dreams, what Freud famously called the royal road to the unconscious. A really key concept here is something called psychogenesis. It's the idea that mental suffering comes from a psychological place, not just a physical one. When veterinarians treat a dog for severe separation anxiety or a parrot for self-harm because of isolation, they're admitting there's a trouble of the soul. They're not just treating a body, they're treating a psyche. And then there are dreams. You know, the discovery of REM sleep in animals was absolutely revolutionary. We've all seen it, right? Your dog is sleeping, their eyes are darting back and forth, their paws are twitching, maybe they're letting out little whimpers. By every neurophysiological measure we have, they are dreaming. They're experiencing a rich, symbolic, and deeply unconscious inner life every single night. So when you start to put all these pieces together, the consciousness, the mental suffering, the trauma, the dreams, you arrive at this really profound conclusion. We don't just share DNA with animals, we share a psychic heritage.
And this forces us to see that this isn't just some interesting scientific debate. This is a deeply ethical one. Because if animals really do possess a complex inner world, if they can be psychologically wounded in ways that mirror our own suffering, then that demands a complete reevaluation of how we treat them. Everything changes.
The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wrote about this shared condition with such haunting clarity. He saw this universal suffering etched onto the face of all nature, a deep melancholy that connects every single living being. It's this powerful recognition that to be alive is to be vulnerable to pain. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most challenging question of all. By starting to understand the depths of the animal mind, we're not just learning about them, we're really holding up a mirror to ourselves. If we can finally recognize a shared world of feeling, of suffering, and of dreaming in them, what does that force us to confront about our own place in this grand, mysterious tapestry of life?